So what happens when you ask the Enneagram teachers where this concept came from and so forth, or even where the drawing came from with the 9 points and so forth and so on, they always refer you back to ancient wisdom. And for instance, the early Christians or the early Jewish people or the early, whatever somebody's faith happened to be, they refer to it as ancient wisdom. But it's a fact that it wasn't until the 13th century and a man named Nasr ad-Din Tusi, because up until that time, if you read any of the books on akhlaq, whether you read Aristotle and Plato, or you read Thomas Aquinas, or you read Moses Maimonides, whoever you read, they say there's either too much or too little of a virtue. They do not talk about the lack of that virtue completely. And it wasn't until Nasr ad-Din Tusi who said, well, not only do we have vices in terms of quantity of too much or too little, but we also have them lacking in terms of quality. So this became the 9 points on the Enneagram. So basically, before Nasr ad-Din Tusi, you can't have 9 points. There weren't 9 points. If you go back to the science of ethics, which is where all of this all began, dividing the self with Aristotle and Plato, dividing the self into the law of three, if we want to call it that, the nafs al-amare and the nafs al-natiqe, if we want to call it that, or we can call it the affect and behavior versus cognition. However we want to talk about it, they would always say that there's too much or too little. So there were only 6 points on the Enneagram. And then therefore it wasn't an Enneagram, it was a hexagram. Until the time of Nasr ad-Din Tusi. But it'd be very interesting if young scholars went back and traced this and did further research and found out, well, no, there was someone before Nasr ad-Din Tusi who added the terms quality to it, who added the other 3. And then also, because there's a difference, so the 3, 6, and 9 are the ones that lack terms of quality. That's why they're off the circumference. That's why they're placed here, off of the circumference, because they don't even have the wisdom. It's not like they have too much or too little. They don't have wisdom at all. Or so that's why the 3, 6, and 9 have that great triangle that Gurdjieff drew, and most of the Sufi Enneagram, most of the Enneagram teachers still use that. But they don't distinguish anything between a 3, 6, and 9 as opposed to a 1, 2, or 4. They see them all as types according to Oscar Ichazo. So the traditional view, or the original idea of it, makes a great distinction between the ones who are lacking in a virtue in terms of quality and those who are lacking a virtue in terms of quantity. So that was one point that I wanted to make.